I still remember the way the champagne glasses caught the light that evening, sparkling brighter than the smiles that surrounded me. Everyone said weddings were where families came together, where old wounds healed beneath music and expensive flowers. My family proved the opposite. I stood near the back of the ballroom, smoothing invisible wrinkles from my emerald dress, while servers carried silver trays between tables dressed in white roses. My older sister, Vanessa, looked flawless beneath the crystal chandeliers. She had always looked flawless. Even as children, she somehow knew how to become the center of every room while I quietly disappeared into the corners. "Smile, Claire," my mother whispered as she walked past me. "Don't look so serious tonight. This isn't about you." It never was. For 33 years, everything revolved around Vanessa. When she quit college after one semester, my parents said she was finding herself. When I graduated first in my engineering class, my father shrugged and asked if I could keep the celebration short, because Vanessa was having a difficult week. When I spent 7 years building my technology startup from a rented garage apartment, working weekends, sleeping beside prototype equipment because I couldn't afford both rent and office space, nobody asked how I was doing. But when Vanessa posted pictures from luxury vacations paid for by whichever wealthy boyfriend happened to be around that season, my parents proudly framed every photo. Eventually, I stopped trying to compete. Silence hurt less than disappointment. The wedding itself was beautiful. The venue overlooked a quiet lake outside Boston, with floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the sunset across polished marble floors. Soft violin music drifted through the room while guests admired towering floral arrangements that probably cost more than my first year's salary. Ironically, I had helped design one small part of this wedding without anyone realizing it. The climate control system keeping the enormous glass ballroom comfortable despite the summer heat used energy management software based on algorithms from my earliest patent. Nobody there knew. Nobody cared. I had almost skipped the invitation. The only reason I came was because my grandmother had squeezed my hand 3 weeks earlier. "You belong in every room your family thinks you don't deserve." She had passed away 2 days later. Those words became the only reason I walked through those ballroom doors. As dinner finished, glasses clinked. The best man spoke first. Then the maid of honor. Laughter filled the room. Finally, Vanessa stood with her champagne flute. "My family has always supported me," she began dramatically. I lowered my eyes. "Here it comes. My parents taught me confidence. They taught me never to settle." She smiled toward our table. "Even though every family has one person who gets a little lost." Several guests chuckled politely. She turned directly toward me. "You know who you are." The room shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough that I could feel dozens of curious eyes finding my face. Vanessa laughed. "I always tell people I have one successful sister and one professional student." More laughter. My father laughed hardest. My mother covered her smile behind her wineglass but never denied it. Professional student? I hadn't taken a class in almost 9 years. I owned 17 patents. My company licensed technology to manufacturers across 3 countries. None of them knew because none of them had ever asked. Vanessa continued. "Claire's still trying to figure life out. We all have different journeys." She raised her glass. "So here's to family. Even the ones who never quite find their place." Applause echoed through the ballroom. My cheeks burned. Not because strangers believed her. Because my own parents applauded. I slowly reached for my purse. Maybe Grandma had been wrong. Maybe I didn't belong here after all. I quietly stood. Before I could take a single step toward the exit, someone else's chair scraped loudly against the marble floor. The father of the groom. Richard Ashford. I recognized his name immediately. Everyone in renewable manufacturing did. His family owned one of the largest industrial technology groups in the country. He wasn't smiling. Instead, he looked confused. "Excuse me," he said calmly. The room fell silent. He looked directly at me. "Would you happen to be Claire Bennett?" I blinked. "Yes." His eyebrows lifted. "I thought I recognized you from your conference presentation in Chicago." Vanessa frowned. "You know my sister?" Richard laughed softly. "Know her?" He looked genuinely surprised. My company has spent nearly 3 years trying to schedule another meeting with Ms. Bennett. Every conversation in the ballroom stopped. Vanessa's smile froze. My father straightened in his chair. Richard continued. My engineers still reference one of your thermal optimization patents almost every week. The word patent seemed to hang in the air. My mother looked at me as if she'd never seen me before. Vanessa forced a laugh. Oh, Claire works with computers or something. Richard turned toward her with polite confusion. Something. He smiled. Your sister developed one of the most efficient adaptive energy models currently licensed in commercial building systems. A murmur spread through nearby tables. Someone whispered, "Wait, really?" Richard wasn't finished. In fact, he reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket and removed a folded business program. I've actually been hoping to ask whether you're considering selling the remaining rights to your newest patent. My heartbeat stopped. I hadn't publicly announced the newest patent. Only companies already under confidentiality agreements even knew it existed. I stared at him. How did you? Our legal team reviewed the filing last month. He smiled warmly. My son told me your name was on the guest list tonight. I thought perhaps it was another Claire Bennett. The groom suddenly laughed. Dad spent 20 minutes asking me if the bride's sister was that Claire Bennett. Several executives seated near the front exchanged surprised glances. One leaned toward another. I've heard of her company. Another nodded. They've been impossible to acquire. Across the room, Vanessa's confident posture slowly collapsed. My father cleared his throat. You own a company? I looked at him. You never asked. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. For the first time in my life, nobody rushed to rescue Vanessa from embarrassment. Richard stepped closer. I hope this isn't inappropriate during a wedding. He smiled apologetically. But if you're willing, I'd love to arrange breakfast tomorrow. He lowered his voice slightly. Our board authorized me to discuss a partnership worth considerably more than an acquisition. I stared at him. A partnership? We don't want to buy your work. His expression carried genuine respect. We want to build the future with the person who created it. Around us, conversations dissolved into whispers. People who hadn't acknowledged me all evening were suddenly watching with open curiosity. Vanessa gripped her champagne glass, so tightly I thought it might crack. Then, for the first time all night, she looked at me not with pity, but with fear. I looked around the ballroom, searching for the punchline. My family had spent decades acting as though I barely existed, and now complete strangers were speaking about my work with a level of respect I had never heard from the people who had raised me. I took a slow breath before answering. I'd be happy to have breakfast tomorrow. Richard Ashford smiled, extending his hand. Excellent. I believe you'll find our proposal surprising. As we shook hands, dozens of guests watched the exchange. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it carried a different weight than the applause Vanessa had received. Hers had been automatic, expected. This was curiosity mixed with admiration. The difference wasn't lost on anyone. Richard returned to his table, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Within minutes, 2 guests approached me. I'm sorry, one woman said with an embarrassed smile. I overheard Mr. Ashford mentioning patents. Are you the Claire Bennett behind Thermocore Dynamics? I nodded. Her eyes widened. My hospital just upgraded to a building system using your technology. Our annual energy costs dropped almost 30%. Before I could respond, another guest joined us. My architecture firm has been trying to license your newest optimization software. Your team is impossible to negotiate with. I laughed softly. My legal department would probably take that as a compliment. Across the room, I caught my parents staring. Not smiling. Staring. As if they were trying to reconcile the quiet daughter they had ignored with the woman strangers suddenly respected. It was almost painful to watch. Almost. 20 minutes later, my mother finally approached. Her voice was unusually gentle. Claire. I turned. She smiled awkwardly. You never told us you were successful. I blinked. I tried. Her forehead wrinkled. When? The day my first patent was approved. She frowned, genuinely searching her memory. You interrupted me because Vanessa wanted everyone to watch a vacation slideshow. Her smile faded. I continued calmly. The year my company became profitable. Silence. You told me we'd celebrate another time because Vanessa had broken up with her boyfriend. My mother's eyes drifted toward the floor. And when Forbes interviewed me, she looked up quickly. I mailed each of you a copy. My father's voice appeared behind her. I don't remember receiving it. I know. I looked directly into his eyes. I found all 3 unopened magazines in Grandma's attic after she passed away. Neither of them spoke. Because they couldn't. Grandma had quietly saved everything. Every newspaper clipping. Every magazine. Every award. Every invitation. Every article. The only person who had believed I mattered had preserved proof that I existed. My father rubbed the back of his neck. We didn't realize. No. I smiled politely. You didn't. For a long moment, none of us moved. Then Vanessa appeared. Her smile looked flawless from a distance. Up close, I saw panic hiding beneath expensive makeup. There you are. She slipped her arm around mine. We need a family picture. I gently removed her hand. I'm not sure you do. She forced another laugh. Oh, don't be dramatic. I'm not. The photographer called everyone toward the floral backdrop. Parents. Bride. Groom. Grandparents' empty chairs decorated with white roses. Vanessa whispered through clenched teeth. Can we please not make tonight about yourself? You made me the subject of your toast. Color drained from her face. Before she could answer, the photographer waved. Family, please. Vanessa hurried into position. My parents instinctively followed. Someone gestured toward the empty space beside them. I remained where I was. The photographer frowned. Miss Bennett. I smiled politely. I think the family picture is complete. A silence spread across the room. My mother looked horrified. Claire. I shook my head gently. For years, I've been standing in pictures where I was cropped emotionally long before anyone touched the camera. The photographer lowered his camera. I don't understand. I answered without taking my eyes off my family. They've practiced taking family photos without seeing me. No one laughed. No one defended them. Instead, several guests looked visibly uncomfortable. Richard Ashford quietly watched from across the ballroom. So did his wife. Neither interrupted. My father stepped forward. Claire, don't do this. I smiled sadly. I'm not doing anything. I looked around the room. I'm simply standing exactly where this family has always placed me. Those words landed harder than I expected. My mother began crying. Not dramatically. Quietly. As though something inside her had finally cracked. The photographer awkwardly lowered the camera. The groom cleared his throat. Maybe we should. But Vanessa suddenly snapped. Oh, for heaven's sake. Every head turned. She pointed directly at me. Can you stop pretending you've been some tragic victim? The room froze again. You've always thought you were smarter than everyone else. Her voice grew louder. You locked yourself in labs while normal people actually had lives. I listened. Calmly. You never cared about this family. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked one simple question. What was my company's name before tonight? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I looked at my father. What industry do I work in? His lips parted. Silence. I turned to my mother. How many patents do I own? She looked helplessly between us. No answer. I nodded slowly. Now tell everyone again which one of us didn't care. Nobody moved. Even the violinists had stopped playing. The silence became unbearable. Finally, Richard Ashford spoke from across the room. I've negotiated with Fortune 500 executives for 30 years. His calm voice carried effortlessly through the ballroom. I've never seen a more convincing demonstration of neglect. Nobody challenged him. Because nobody could. Vanessa's husband shifted uneasily beside her. He looked from me to his new wife. Then to my parents. Finally he asked the question no one expected. Wait. He frowned. You seriously didn't know any of this? My father whispered. We thought she just worked for some engineering company. Several guests exchanged stunned looks. Richard's wife quietly said, "That's heartbreaking." The words hit my mother harder than any accusation could have. She suddenly covered her face. Oh my God! She wasn't crying because strangers had discovered the truth. She was crying because, for the first time, she had heard it spoken aloud. Not by me, by people with no reason to lie. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt strangely empty. Years of hoping for this moment had taught me one painful lesson. Recognition arrives too late when love should have come first. I picked up my purse. I should go. This time, no one tried to stop me immediately. As I walked toward the ballroom doors, Richard caught up beside me. "I hope tonight didn't ruin your evening." I smiled faintly. No. I looked back once. My evening began the moment someone finally asked me about my work. He nodded with quiet understanding. Before I stepped outside, he handed me a cream-colored envelope. Our preliminary proposal. I glanced at the embossed seal. Ashford Industrial Group. You haven't even seen my newest prototype. Richard smiled knowingly. We don't invest in inventions first. He paused. We invest in people whose character survives being underestimated. For the first time that night, emotion tightened my throat. I thanked him and walked into the cool evening air. Behind me, music slowly resumed inside the ballroom, but it sounded distant now, as though I had already left more than just a wedding behind. I didn't know that before the sun rose the next morning, a phone call would expose one final betrayal, one that had quietly linked my family to my company's greatest professional setback for nearly 2 years, and it would give me the chance to seek justice without destroying anyone except the lies they had chosen to live behind. I barely slept that night. Not because of the meeting with Richard Ashford. Not because of the unexpected attention. Not even because of the humiliation Vanessa had tried to put me through. I couldn't sleep because of one sentence. A phone call will expose one final betrayal. Those words kept circling my mind. I hated that a small part of me still expected disappointment. After everything, after building a company from nothing, after proving myself to people who had never bothered to look, there was still a wounded little girl inside me waiting for someone to say, "We're proud of you." But I knew better. The next morning, I arrived at the Ashford offices before sunrise. The building stood in the center of Boston's financial district, all glass and steel, a monument to decades of innovation. I walked through the lobby carrying the same old leather folder I had carried since my first prototype. It was scratched. The corners were worn. Inside were my original designs. The ideas everyone had dismissed. The ideas I had protected when nobody else believed in them. Richard greeted me personally. "I hope you don't mind," he said as we walked toward the conference room. "I invited 2 members of my technology division." Of course. I expected a typical business negotiation. Charts. Numbers. Market projections. Instead, Richard placed a file on the table. "Before we discuss partnership terms, there's something you should see." I opened it. The first page contained a series of emails. My hands immediately went cold, because I recognized the names. My father's name, my mother's name, and Vanessa's. I looked up slowly. "What is this?" Richard's expression changed. Not businesslike anymore. Personal. "We discovered this during our due diligence." I turned the page. The emails were from almost 2 years earlier. At that time, my company had been preparing to launch our most ambitious project, a revolutionary energy system that could reduce industrial waste and completely change the manufacturing industry. It was my life's work. But 3 months before the launch, everything collapsed. A competitor released a suspiciously similar technology. Investors backed away. Contracts disappeared. My company nearly failed. I remembered those months. The panic. The sleepless nights. The fear that everything I had sacrificed was about to disappear. I remembered calling my family. My father had told me, "Maybe this is a sign you should find a safer career." My mother had said, "Not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur." Vanessa had simply laughed. I always knew the science thing was temporary. I thought they were being careless with their words. I never imagined they knew the truth. Richard tapped the documents. Your competitor didn't discover your research independently. My stomach tightened. What are you saying? He slid another page toward me. A payment record. A transfer from a technology company. Sent to Vanessa. My vision blurred. No. Richard's voice was quiet. I'm sorry, Claire. I stared at the numbers. The amount wasn't even large. $22,000. $20,000 for someone to destroy years of my work. $20,000 for my sister to betray me. I whispered, why? Richard didn't answer immediately, because he knew the answer would hurt more. Finally, he said, the company that stole your research believed you were easier to defeat if your family had access to your personal information. I looked at the emails again. My father had forwarded my business plans. My mother had discussed my schedule. And Vanessa had taken everything. My private notes. My prototype details. My upcoming launch dates. I remembered all those nights she had visited my apartment pretending to support me. You work too hard, Claire. You need someone to help you relax. You know you can trust me, right? Those weren't words of love. They were keys. And I had handed them to her. I closed the folder. For a moment, I felt that old anger rising. The kind that burns everything it touches. I wanted to expose her publicly. I wanted everyone to know. I wanted her to feel the same humiliation she had given me. But then I remembered Grandma. She had once told me something I never forgot. Revenge that destroys you is not revenge. It's another way of losing. I looked at Richard. What do you want me to do? He leaned back. That's the interesting part. He smiled slightly. We expected anger. I am angry. I know. He nodded. But anger isn't controlling you. I looked down at the documents. No. I took a deep breath. Because I've spent years building something. I'm not going to let them prove they were right about me. That was when I made my decision. Not revenge through destruction. Revenge through truth. 3 days later, I returned home. Not to apologize. Not to fight. To invite them to dinner. My mother cried when she saw the invitation. My father looked suspicious. Vanessa looked annoyed. You want us all together? I smiled. Yes. She crossed her arms. What changed? Nothing. I looked at her. That's why we're having dinner. The restaurant was quiet and elegant. A private room. Just the four of us. For the first time in years, nobody interrupted me. I placed a folder on the table. My father looked nervous. What is this? Everything. I opened it. The emails. The payments. The evidence. The room became silent. Vanessa's face changed first. Not guilt. Fear. Where did you get that? I almost smiled. Because that question told me everything. Not that's fake. Not you misunderstood. Just panic. My mother covered her mouth. Oh my God. My father looked at Vanessa. Is this true? She looked away. You're exaggerating. I laughed softly. That's your defense? She suddenly became angry. You had everything. The word shocked me. Everything. She stood up. Yes. You always got attention for being smart. Everyone praised you. Teachers loved you. People admired you. So you destroyed my company because you were jealous? Her eyes filled with tears. You don't understand what it's like living next to you. I shook my head. No, Vanessa. My voice stayed calm. You don't understand what it's like living invisible. Nobody spoke. Then my father whispered something I never expected. I knew. I froze. What? He couldn't look at me. I knew Vanessa had something to do with the leak. My entire body went numb. You knew. My mother began crying. Your father thought it would ruin the wedding if the truth came out. I stared at them. All those months. All that pain. They knew. They chose silence. And somehow, that hurt more than Vanessa's betrayal. Because enemies hurt you because they don't love you. Family hurts you because they should. I slowly stood. You all made a choice. My father looked up. Claire. No. I shook my head. You don't get to explain this. I placed another document on the table. Vanessa looked at it. What is that? The partnership agreement with Ashford Industrial. Her face changed. I don't understand. You will. I smiled. My company recovered. The patent you tried to destroy became more valuable after independent testing proved its potential. My father stared. How much? I looked at him. Enough. That was all they needed to know. Vanessa whispered. You're trying to make us feel bad. No. I picked up my purse. I'm making sure you understand something. I looked at each of them. You spent years trying to prove I was the failure of this family. I paused. But the only thing that failed was your ability to recognize my worth. I walked away. This time nobody laughed. Nobody mocked me. Nobody called me lost. Months later, my company reached a level I once only dreamed about. The partnership with Ashford changed everything. My technology helped transform entire industries. But the biggest change wasn't financial. It was personal. I stopped waiting for my family to finally choose me. I chose myself. At the opening ceremony for our new research center, reporters asked me about my success. They expected a story about ambition, hard work, innovation. They didn't expect me to talk about betrayal. But I did. Not to expose anyone. Not to punish anyone. Just to tell the truth. My greatest achievement wasn't creating a technology. I looked at the crowd. It was learning that my value was never determined by the people who failed to see it. Years later, I still had the emerald dress from Vanessa's wedding. I kept it in my closet. Not because it reminded me of humiliation, but because it reminded me of the night everything changed. The night I walked into a room believing I was the forgotten one, and walked out knowing I was the person everyone else had been trying to become. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't watching people fall. It's standing so tall that their opinions can no longer reach you.